Here we go. Yay.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. Look at all these beautiful Black women.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you
Well,
for being patient. I had a museum guest that popped in at the last minute, so I was keeping up with them.
no worries at all. We first want to just thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. It is truly, truly an honor.
Right.
My name is Micaiah. I'm the one who you've kind of been communicating with
Mhm.
through text and email. And I'll let everyone just kind of introduce themselves.
Awesome.
My name is Amanla. I am one of the founders of Film Girl Social Archive, along with Love, who I'm gonna pass the baton to.
Hi, so lovely to meet you. Very excited to talk to you today. I'm Love, and I am a co-founder as well. And then we have Lacey.
Hi, so nice to meet you. I'm Lacey. I'm a part of FGSA, and I'm really excited to be talking to you today too. Um, and I'm really happy to be a part of FGSA and like empowering Black women. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about Black women and empowering us.
Oh, we can just talk about that all day. um, I'm Jilchristina, but everybody calls me Jill. And I'm here at the house where the museum and the mural are, and I happen to have my mural t-shirt on.
I just thought it would be really interesting to try and imagine, like do some like imaginative practices to try and figure out what these photos would look like if Black women were to take them, or if we were to be lensing ourselves and capturing ourselves. So that means like thinking about the way that the women showed up in the movement and the way that they represented themselves and the way that power in the movement, and then taking that information and like making it into, and then creating some sort of like imaginative space where we're like, okay, so based on this information, this is how we can assume we would be capturing ourselves, you know.
So for me and this project, even though the subject matter is the Black Panther Party, and then the subject of the mural is the women, the subject of the museum is the survival programs, right? So the whole project is uplifting what the Black Panther Party was doing and exposing the fact that the majority of the Panthers were women. And most of the people in the country think that the Panthers were male and think that the Panthers were terrorists, right? So when the reality is most of the Panthers were women and the Panthers were actually humanitarians, and arguably the largest group of humanitarians that's ever gathered in world history under one name, right? So when you learn what they were actually doing versus what most people were taught they were doing, it's a complete opposite. But the other part of the project that is more where I feel the expert is the expert in what I'm doing and what I am trying to model for the Black community, for Black women specifically, is the burdens of the world are so incredibly heavy and they're harming, most specifically, I think, Black women. In that we don't have a lot of outlets, we don't have a lot of places to go. Our shoulders are curled a lot of times with all these things that are happening in the world. And what was going on for me in June 2020, which is when this whole thing started, and everything that was going on in the country, where you had COVID, you had George Floyd, you had the rebellions, you had Trump wiling out, the elections were coming up, those were very stressful. Then you had Breonna Taylor's murder. It was just one thing after another. And if you remember the news programming, it was like, COVID is killing Black people at record numbers. I just kept remember hearing that over and over again. So I got to a point, like many, many people, specifically people living in Black bodies, where I was completely overwhelmed to the point where my exhaustion left me non-functioning. And you're in quarantine, we're in lockdown. We have lost all of our normal coping mechanisms that might be, you know, oh, I'm going to go get a hug from my sister. I'm going to go out for drinks with my friends, all these things that we were used to doing. So I was trying to process it on my own. And all of that processing resulted in this huge mural and this museum. Because now what I talk about all the time, and what I talk specifically to Black people about and specifically to Black women about, is we have the ability to shift our focus, and we can decide what we're going to focus on. And what that means to me is in June 2020, I was so focused on what they're doing to us that I had become non-functioning. And when I sat in meditation, and when I sit in meditation, I ask my ancestors for things and for guidance and questions. And I was asking them, what am I supposed to do? How is this sustainable? How am I going to get out of this? Like, I'm so completely lopsided with this rage and this grief and this sorrow. And their answer back to me was to surround myself with Black joy. And when you look at what was going on in June 2020 and juxtaposed to Black joy, it's literally the opposite, right? And so they were asking me to shift my focus into something that would make me feel joyful. And what then that meant is then I had to sit with myself and decide, what did joy look like to me, right? And I had to figure that out in my bones. Like, so it could be, so love, you might be in a really sad mood or really depressed, and Amanla wants to come over and cheer you up. But guess what? If you don't know what's going to cheer you up, and you can't articulate it to her, then she's not necessarily going to be able to cheer you up. You could talk about your sadness, because you may know what that is. I can talk about that all day. But in that moment of June 2020, nobody could cheer me up because I didn't know what I was missing, and I didn't know what Black joy would look like. And what it ended up translating to me, and when the ancestors said that and I'm sitting in meditation, my response was, but that's just it. There is no Black joy. That's why I'm suffering. And their response was, if you can't find it, then create it. And that's when I had to sit and figure out, what does it look like to me in this dark, dark time? And what I realized, what I was missing is all of us had become obsessed with our oppression. All of the murals all the way across where I am in Oakland were all depicting lynching victims, from Emmett Till to George Floyd, and every Black and brown face in between. And they were all being painted by us, Black and brown people. And my epiphany, or my whatever sparked in my head, was I said, how are we memorializing what they're doing to us and calling it protest? How is this helpful to our psyches, to our heart, to our soul? We're painting pictures of what they're doing to us, traumatizing ourselves over and over and over again, because we keep wanting to convince them that what they're doing is wrong. And we think if we keep painting pictures of Trayvon Martin, we're going to convince them and we're going to get an apology or something. I don't know. I digress. All that to say was what it stuck in my head during that time, during the rebellions, when I saw these murals. Then I got home and I looked at my house and I said, instead of putting a mural on my house that honors or memorialize what they're doing to us, I'm going to put a mural on my house that honors what we do for the world. And what the shift was, and what this whole project is, when I do tours, this is what I'm trying to encourage people to do. And again, specifically Black people, specifically Black women, is I can focus on police brutality and the lynching of Black people and the oppression of Black women and Trump, and I can focus on it, but me focusing on it is only doing me harm. It's not going to change. I'm not going to stop police brutality. I'm just going to not sleep at night and consume too much alcohol because I'm depressed, right? Then I can shift to say, these things over here still exist. I'm not ignoring them. I'm not burying my head. But guess what? If I shift and I start painting pictures of liberation, and I start painting pictures of revolution and success and Black people thriving and Black people fighting for the liberation of other people, I go from this to this every single time.
Mhm.
And that's when I was deciding to do the mural, and I spoke to the first Panther, Erica Huggins. I said, I don't know what the mural is going to look like, but I know what I want Black women to feel when they look at it. And I want them to feel proud, and I want their backs to go straight, and I want them to remember I don't just descend from lynching victims. I don't just descend from slavery. I don't just descend from Emmett Till. I also descend from James Baldwin and Maya Angelou and Shirley Chisholm and all of these Panther women that have made it so we're living the lives that we're living today because of what they fought for. And as long as I stay focused on what Black people are doing, like the four of you, I'm joyful and I can keep functioning. As soon as I start to slip back into what the oppressor wants me to think about, then I'm back to catatonic, right? If I think about all the people who have been killed since George Floyd, if I think about it, I'm going to become greatly depressed, and that's not going to change the fact that those people were killed, but I can focus on revolution and wake up in the morning joyful.
Okay, so that is a great segue into my question, because in my mind, like when I'm thinking about like these women and how they're represented in the photos in your exhibit, they all seem like they're all working hard, but they seem joyful.
Yeah.
I think a part of that is because of their like focus on revolution. And I'm wondering if you have any like note about that, anything you want to say about that? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, because when my first conversation with Erica, and I'm telling her about this search for Black joy, for me to be able to balance my emotions, because the thing was, and I don't know if any of you practice Buddhism or meditation and understanding the idea that, and it relates to the Black Panther Party as well, the idea that, anger and sadness and sorrow and grief are all emotions that are valid and beautiful and deserve honor and deserve to be held. But when that's all there is, you can't unpack any of it, right? So I needed to bring joy and celebration and learning and education back in, so I was balanced. And then I can just kind of pick away at the sorrow until it gets smaller and smaller. It's not consuming me. But for the photographs and me talking to Erica about that, and Erica Huggins is the lead mentor on the mural project, and she lives here in Oakland. I've known her in community for years, and she was the first person that I contacted to ask her permission to do this mural. I'm not a Panther. I don't have Panthers in my family. Ask for her mentorship, ask for her blessing, ask for her guidance. And during that initial conversation and talking about Black joy, she was very clear and very adamant that they were very joyful, the Black Panther Party. And when you see them smiling and you see them, laughing with each other, that it was genuine. And that's exactly what has unfolded with this whole project. In the very beginning of the Black Panther Party, when they had the leather jackets and the berets and they were marching and they were loaded up all the time, that image or that persona lasted only about 2 years for a variety of reasons, one of which they were too findable, they were too obvious, and they were too vulnerable. If they were all dressed alike, they were immediately spotted as Panthers and the police could open fire. So after about 2 years, they shifted and just wore regular clothing. But the other thing that shifted was also their focus, similarly to what happened with me, not even knowing that this parallel was going to be there. So when they first started, they started because of self-defense and protecting the community against police violence. And they were charging state buildings and they were confronting police officers and things like that. But what I have been taught by these Panthers and all these conversations for the past 3+ years is that quickly became unsustainable because they didn't have the numbers, they didn't have the training, they didn't have the backup, and they knew if they kept this line of confrontation that they were going to be killed, all of them. So what they said was, one of their famous lines or quotes or titles is "survival pending revolution." And when they coined that phrase, Huey Newton coined that phrase, it meant they were shifting their focus from the man and fighting the man and demanding everything from the man, and you better do this. They shifted their focus and said, you know what? We need to focus on us. Fuck them. What about us? And we can go into our community and feed our people, educate our people, house our people, bring them medical care, bring them protection, get them job training, It's about us. It's about we. And when they shifted that focus and it was genuine, they were serving the people with their body and soul, that brought them joy. So it was an authentic expression. And she said, you know, even though they're being chased by the FBI and being shot at by the police, there's nothing that replaces the feeling when you've offered somebody aid. And when you know that you've made their life better, and you know that your generosity of time or skill has saved that person in some way. And that's what they were doing on a daily basis while running from the police and getting shot at by the FBI. So, you know, we're badasses.
Yeah, that's so gangster.
Yeah.
Okay, so in thinking about like their day to day, right? I'm wondering like what the roles, like, okay, I already kind of know this because I know about the Black Panthers, but I'd love to hear your take on like the gender roles in the community and how they were kind of splitting up things to do, if that makes sense. Yeah.
No, it does. It's an interesting conversation to have, because I'm not here to romanticize the Panthers. The Black Panther Party was in no way, shape, or form void of misogyny and hatred of women, the assault of women, all of those things. And if you want details, I can give them to you, but I don't need to traumatize you. So all of those things existed, and a lot of women that joined the Panthers did not survive the Panthers, in that they joined the Panthers, something horrible happened, they left the Panthers. That is the story of many of the Black women. It was a little bit different for the queer identified women, is what I have been able to glean from the conversations that I've had with a variety of these women. They seem to have had a different experience. But as far as the gender role goes, the leaders and the most people that you heard speaking were male. The Eldridge Cleavers, who's an admitted rapist, and I hate him, but that's a sidebar. Huey Newton, you know, Bobby Seale were the most vocal. And then you had colorism that existed very extremely in the Black Panther Party. So the women that you saw push towards the mic and towards the photographer were the Kathleen Cleavers, the Elaine Browns, the Erica Huggins. Sidebar, that's why there's no light-skinned women on the mural, because the mural is supposed to be dedicated to the invisible Black women of the Black Panther Party, and that would not be light-skinned women. Those are pretty much the only women you ever saw, was the light-skinned women. That being said, the gender roles that they seem to be, from what I have gleaned from the photographs and the conversations, you know, the women were on patrol, the women were marksmen, the women were in the shootouts, the men were cooking breakfast, the men were serving the children. Both men and women were serving the elders, whether it was escorting them to the grocery store, the doctors, or the bank. So if an elder needed, and the banking situation was security, the Panthers represented security for the elders. It could be a Panther woman or a Panther man that would do that. So in that sense, it appears as if they were all trained to do all things. And you were required to be prepared and ready to do all things. So somebody said, I heard somebody, when she joined the Panthers, she had a friend of hers that was going to join with her. And on one of the first something or another, somebody popped a trunk and it was full of guns, and they were about to roll out. And this sister said, yeah, nah, that's not me. And was like not prepared to do that. And she bounced. She did not become a Panther, right? So it's to each their own. I would have been a Panther. I would have had the gun. I wouldn't have had a problem with that at all. But I know that, for example, Tarika Lewis, who still lives here in Oakland, is named as the first woman to join the Panther Party. She was already a violin virtuoso at 15, 16. She joined the party at 16 and said, I had to put down the violin and pick up a gun to protect my people. She then became an expert marksman and a marksman leader in the Black Panther Party, and was then responsible for teaching everybody else how to shoot, men and women. So she didn't have an official leadership role, but she was And she came by here one day and stayed for like 4 hours. It was great. And it's one of those things when you're interacting with these photographs as us, as regular people, we're looking at an archive, we're looking at history, we're looking at a moment in time. When the Panthers come through and they're looking at these photographs, they're looking at like their family photo albums. And they know exactly where every picture was and who's standing next to them. And it's a different experience. But I confirmed with her, was she an expert marksman? And she, shyly but proudly confirmed the information. It was really, she very humbly, yet very, it was humble and proud arrogance at the same time, if that makes sense. So the other thing I wanted to reference back, you mentioned Stephen Shames. Yes, white man who was a predominant photographer. And his name is escaping me, but I don't know if you're familiar. There's a Black man, just for the sake of the photographs, who was a young man in the Panthers whose film was just recently found. Are you familiar with any of this?
I haven't heard about that.
I'll find out his name. So he was like 14 or 15 years old in the 60s or 70s when he was a Black Panther. And he was a Panther and a photographer. Somehow all of his film, probably because the FBI, maybe he went underground, I don't know. He had a whole big box of 35 millimeter film that was found 50 years later. And then all those reels were developed, and it's all these beautiful, amazing photographs that had never been seen before. I haven't even seen that many. I want to say that maybe the New York Times did a special on him. And he came by here. I met him once. He has his photographs up in the second museum in downtown Oakland. I can find his name easily. But anyway, back to Stephen Shames. One of the interactions I had with him when I was doing all the interviews in 2020 is I asked him, was he intentionally photographing the women? Because any photographs of women in the Panther Party at that time, before this other brother came about, were photographs by Stephen Shames. And I said, so were you intentionally trying to make sure that the women were represented? And his response was, I was taking pictures of Panthers, and Panthers were women. So wow. He wasn't seeking out the women. He said Panthers were women. And he said, I was photographing who was doing the work, and the women were doing the work. So I thought that was a pretty.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, did you notice any differences between the photographs of the young man, like the photographs the young man took, versus
I haven't seen them yet. I don't have them in my memory. And I haven't got, the other museum just opened about a month ago, and I haven't been over there yet. But that's an excellent question, because I'm sure there is Black Panther.
I also have a question about the photos that you already have. Wondering if you feel like there are any parts of the story that are missing in the photographs.
Well, initially when you were talking and imagining what the photographs would look like if women had taken some, if women had taken any. And I think what immediately came to my heart when you said that is they would have exposed the sadness, they would have exposed the pain, and they would have exposed the harm. I feel very confident that that would have been documented based on the stories that the women have told me. Makes me understand that those images are still in their heads, right? So if they're still in their heads and they had the camera, they would have photographed that sister's face. You would have seen the look in her eyes, that kind of thing.
It's interesting too, because when we're talking about Black, like that's a part of it too. The pictures that I've seen from your exhibit, they do seem joyful and they do seem like everyone's working together. This is the great energy. You know, we're all doing this for our liberation and we're all self-empowered, all this stuff. But you don't really get a sense of like what the women were going through. I'd love to know like what you, if we could get a little bit more detailed in terms of like capturing that pain, what you imagine like those images would look like.
I think that there's, you know, I think about, I'm seeing his photographs, last name Parks, beautiful Black man. What's his first name? Parks. Gordon Parks. It's like, you know, that every once in a while, when you look at photographs from way back in the day, you might have one photograph of little kids running through the fire hydrant, right? In pure bliss. But then you may have another photograph where you've caught the subject off guard. They're not posing for the photograph, but they're lost in thought. That's what I imagine those photographs to be. That's what I imagine a woman, what I would do as a photographer. I'm not really a photographer anymore, but that was something I did for years. And you're capturing the subject in thought, where they're not necessarily engaging with the photographer. They're somewhere else, but you still captured it. And I feel like, I don't know how else to describe it, but like talking to the women and in these conversations, the pauses that would happen on the calls when I would ask for, I don't even remember if I would ask them or if they would offer it, but there was many times, not always, during several of the conversations with different women, there was often during those conversations a pause that would come where they were either remembering something that was hard or at the same time grappling with whether or not they were going to share it with me. And I know that for a fact because, for example, some of the conversations would go like, one of the stories that Erica told me was she was very gentle with my heart and very careful to not traumatize me. Not, you know, which is what I'm saying about the murals of lynching victims. I don't need to be traumatized over and over again. She said, she was just like, you know, and it wasn't all pretty, Jill. So it's like, it wasn't necessarily easy for all of the women to be Panthers. And I said, I can imagine that. And she said, for example, there was a young woman, she was beautiful. She was, you know, just vivacious. She was full of life. She was maybe 18, 19 years old. And we would work hand in hand, day after day. And she was so delightful. And then one day I saw her and she was gone. And I didn't say anything. Half the time on these calls with these sisters, with these elders, I didn't say anything. I just listened. And you just don't want to talk. And then there would be a pause, would be silence. And she said everything in her eyes was gone. Everything in the way she walked was gone. And then she was physically gone. And we never knew what happened to her. Did she leave of her own volition? Did something else happen? But what happened the 24 hours prior that everything in her eyes was gone? And I said, yes. And she said, do I need to describe anything more? And I said, no, ma'am. She said, do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? Yes, ma'am. Do you understand what possibly happened to her? Yes, I do, ma'am. And that's how the conversations would go. I know at least 2 women that left the party, just like had just enough because of assault, like one more assault and that was it, we're leaving. It's not something that I've ever talked to any of them directly about. They've never spoken to me directly about it. Elaine Brown has been, she doesn't mix her words under any circumstances whatsoever. So she's not trying to save anybody's soul. She'll say whatever she wants to you, whether it traumatizes you or not. So she has been the most descriptive and things that would happen to the women. And sometimes the women would gather together and fight back, and sometimes they wouldn't, which is another photograph I could see being taken, which I haven't necessarily seen in any of the photographs I've seen. It's like you see photographs of women, at the rallies with their fist up, or at the rallies with they were doing whatever. But I imagine these women were feeling themselves. These women knew they were badass. They knew they were changing the world. They knew that they had guns. They knew that they were doing. And so I would imagine that there would have been more pictures of women with guns. There would have been more pictures of like groups of women posted up, like, what I mean? Like just being badasses, is they were teenagers, right? And teenagers have a certain bravado about, they've got a chip on their shoulder. They think they're invincible. They think they're immortal. And I don't think that the women got to showcase, when I look at these photographs, they're never represented as the soldiers that they were. They're never, there's that iconic famous image of Bobby Seale and Huey Newton with the leather and the guns. I would imagine that there would have been more pictures of women like that if women were taking the pictures. But.
Yeah, like that. I feel that, on a visceral level, like I really do. Even in just like talking to my grandparents and hearing the differences between like what my grandfather says versus what my grandmother says. Like she used to tell me about how she would gather the women in her organization and get them to fight back against the men and their chauvinism. So yeah, and those stories are like so underrepresented. Like we don't really hear that side of the story that often. So I think what you're doing is really, really special. I guess my last question is, how do you want like your mural and your exhibit to impact the way that Black women like see themselves and think about themselves? You've definitely answered this before, but just to like put the cherry on the top.
Before I forget, and I'll answer that question, I will send you a link, because I just thought of it, and I don't know why I didn't think of it before, a film that was made by a woman in the Panther Party at, I want to say, either the 30th or the 40th anniversary. One of the women I think it's called Rank and File. It's on my YouTube, but it's not public. And Ethel Paris is her name, one of the Panthers. And she did this film. And in that film, they talk about sexual assault. It's very short. It's very short, maybe 15, 20 minutes, I don't remember. But one of the things that stuck out to me, and it was a roundtable discussion with like 6 or 7 Panther women. And one of the things they said was the reason why so many women married Panthers was it was the one way to protect yourself from being raped. If you were partnered with a male, another male could not touch you. If you were a single woman in the Panther Party, consent was not an option. That's what they say in the film. That's not my words. You could not say no. It's wild. And it's the thing is, it's balancing, it's balancing this newfound love and adoration for the Black Panther Party and sharing all this beautiful history of humanitarianism and activism and all these things. And I'm more likely to have this conversation with brothers that come to the museum, especially if I peep them as some level of consciousness and some level of intelligence and some level of emotional intelligence, then I'll broach this subject with them. Because, and what I talk to them about, we can't romanticize the Black Panthers as this perfect humanitarian group. And we as Black women can't romanticize ourselves as, wow, we were 70% of the Panthers, look how cool we are, whatever, and put these women on a pedestal, because all the things were happening at the same time. Yes, they were helping the people. And again, it goes back to these two different paradigms, these two different focuses. Yes, they were helping people. Yes, they were serving the people. They were feeding people, but they were also abusing women. They were raping women, and they were doing harm. both those things were happening at the same time. I don't know of any of the women in their adulthood that were able to ever have those conversations freely about what happened to them in the Panther Party. I certainly know that the men don't have it. There's two brothers that have come in here that I've befriended that are Panthers, that they speak freely about it. They knew what was going on. They were not the perpetrators, but they knew what was going on. One of them was in prison the whole time and couldn't do anything. And the other one was an East Coast Panther, where apparently it wasn't as bad. The West Coast was bad. So Oakland, this area was bad. San Francisco, East Coast, where like Asada Shakur was, Afeni Shakur, that they were on a different level apparently. And that kind of stuff, apparently, not that I've heard. Anyway, back to the other question of, remind me what you asked me about the mural.
Well, I was just asking how you wanted, like how you saw it empowering Black women. I know you did mention how, you don't have any lighter skinned women on the wall because you want to represent like the forgotten Black woman. But even deeper, like what does it mean for you to have that on your wall, and like how do you want people to feel when they walk past it? And how do you want people to feel when they see the exhibit?
Everything that I intended for it to do is happening. I'll say that. So what I was saying to myself at the time is I needed a Black joy in my life, and Black joy in my life was going to be a healing element that I was missing. And if I needed Black joy and I needed healing, then clearly my community needs that. And if I, as a Black woman, am suffering in this way, I know other Black women are suffering in this way. And if this is going to be a fix for me, I know that this is going to be a fix for other Black women. And that has been, I have bore witness to that time and time again for the past 2.5, almost 3 years, with visitors to the mural and visitors to the exhibit, children and adults. And what I always say is, it's the exact opposite of what we usually do when we're around Black people. A lot of the times we as Black people get together and we talk about our oppression. We talk about white people. And a lot of the times we do that because we're so busy getting gaslit everywhere else in our life, at our office when Becky with straight hair said some shit to us. And then we went to HR and the HR was like, no, that didn't mean that. You're making that up. You make everything about race. Well, I'm probably going to come back home and with the Black people say, this is what happened. That was fucked up, right? And you want to be validated. But what I keep saying, we need to do that. I understand we need that outlet, but there needs to be a timer on it. And at some point in time, we need to stop focusing on white people. We need to stop focusing on what white people are doing, what white people think, what white people have done, what white people think of us. It's like that to me, when I look at it and I pull back, it is such a successful tool of oppression that these assholes have created, and that they have created a system where the oppressed has become obsessed with our oppression. It's all we talk about. It's all the pictures we paint. It's the essays we write. It's the fucking films we make. Everything is about what white people are doing to Black people. Am I going to think about history in the way they want me to think about it? Or am I going to think about my history? So that's the whole idea of this project, and what I want people to leave feeling or thinking or understanding is nobody's going to save us but us. And us being saved has fuck all to do with white people. It has nothing to do with us convincing them of anything, of us protesting anything, of us learning their system or beating their system or playing the game. None of that. None of that. Their system is so sophisticated and so powerful. It doesn't matter if we infiltrate it. It's not going to save Black people. It's just going to steal your soul. That's what's going to happen. That's what they want to happen. Their system is running 24 hours a day, pedal on the gas, no brake system in sight, to maintain the system of power and oppression, because they have no reason to break. Everything that they're doing benefits them. everything that they're doing makes sense to them. They want us to see ourselves as oppressed. I'm going to see myself as a revolutionary, and I'm going to see myself and my people free. And to expect my oppressor to teach me about liberation is a fool's game. The oppressor is going to teach me about oppression. The oppressor is going to put up monuments to their heroes. That's what they should do. So that means I need to teach myself about freedom, and I need to put up monuments to my heroes. It's like, we need to teach each other our history. We need to have these conversations. And that's what this whole project is about, is people coming into the museum and understanding we are not just what the white man made. We have so much, so many things that we've done, created, said, read, whatever. And can we please just focus on those things? Can we please focus on what Black people do, what Black people did? And aside from the male and misogyny, it's very hard to find large incidents in Black history that were heinous or evil or devious or anything compared to white history. And the majority of Black history, when we study it, is uplifting. This is Leola. Say hi, Leola.
Oh, she's good.
Hi.
Love a black cat. Look at her. She's like, Mom, who are these people?
Exactly. She's like, why are you paying attention to me? Her name is Leola Fat Baby King. And she's a Black Panther. She's just a kitten. And Leola King, you can Google her, as a amazing Black woman from San Francisco who was an entrepreneur and business owner and chef who was repeatedly targeted by the police and by white people and eminent domain. And you can Google her. She's an amazing woman who should have died a multimillionaire, and her generations behind her should be billionaires by now. But they took everything from her, and she'd rebuild it, and they take it again and rebuild it and take it again. Resilient. There's like photographs of her and Josephine Baker, and she's badass.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Leola King.
Leola King. Definitely go look her up.
Yeah.
I want to open the floor to Lacey, Love, Micaiah, just in case I missed any questions or you guys have your own questions before we wrap up.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'm just curious. You've kind of touched on it already, but I'm curious to know what you've learned about yourself, what you've learned about the movement, what you've learned in general, just like throughout this journey of curating this project, or of being at the forefront of this project. Yeah, just like your experience in the journey and like some gems that you've taken with you.
I think the main thing I've learned at almost 58 is there's no need whatsoever to stay in the same career just because that's what you decided to do at 18. That's like a really short and dirty answer. The fact, what I'm doing now with this project is completely rooted in education. And I have groups of 48 fourth graders. I have groups of 100, Asian American students from around the country, and they're all coming here to learn about humanitarianism and activism. And my focus and lens is, yes, it's rooted in the Black Panther Party, but I'm trying to let them know, like what you said, Amanla, in the beginning, this is what humanitarianism and activism looks like today. This is what I'm doing today in my community today. This is what you could also be doing, right? But all that to say, to rewind, at 18, I wanted to be a teacher, and I think that's all I wanted to be. I can't really think of anything. I wanted to be a model. I wanted to be a world traveler, all these things, right? And I went to college and got a degree. I went to college, actually, that's what it was. I went to college my freshman year, and I realized I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was like, why am I here? I don't know what classes to take. I dropped out of college for 4 years, moved to New York and did model, then moved to San Francisco, ended up at San Francisco State, where I was older, more mature, and had more interests. and realized I wanted to learn more about women and more about Blackness, because I realized that was completely void of information, my K through 12, which it is for everybody, was not void in my family. So I was raised understanding who the Panthers were and who, you know, Ella Baker was and Baynard Rustin. I was raised at home with that information, which is where it's supposed to be taught as far as I'm concerned, until we have our own schools. So by the time I got back to college, I was in the Black Studies department and Women's Studies department and got a double major with the intention of being a teacher. After that, I got a master's in education, international multicultural education, and taught for 10 years. And I was like, yeah, I'm done with this. I can't do this anymore. I love the kids. I could not deal with the parents or the administration. It was just awful, broken. And I was also one of the only Black teachers with a predominantly Black and brown student body, and all the kids end up in my room because the white people didn't know how to discipline them or didn't want to. That was part of it. And also because the kids wanted to be in my classroom. They were like, let's go to Miss Vest's room, right? So that was cool. But after 10 years, I burnt out. And then for the next 30 years, maybe 25 years, I did nothing to do with education. Everything I did was I worked at a fertility clinic for 10 years. And the majority of past that, I've done production. So I travel the world and do live music production. It's nothing to do with a master's in education or any of the student loans that I have, right? So at some point in time, I was beating myself up about it and saying, it's just like, God, why did I get that master's and whatever. And when COVID hit, we were all on tour, and March 12th, tour got canceled. All of us got sent home. We're all used to being gone for weeks at a time. And suddenly, like many people, we're now stuck in our homes, like twiddling our thumbs. And as it went on, I was thinking, oh shit, now what am I going to do for a living? You know, I'm like 55 years old or something. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to have to reinvent myself again. Then fast forward to June, the mural is happening. And then 6 months later into March, the museum happens. And I have this house that I've had for 25 years. And I've always wanted the whole thing to myself, but needed the tenants to pay my mortgage. And it just all started to unfold. And I remember I wrote on a Post-it note somewhere, and this was like my major learning thing, is here I thought I had to reinvent myself again, when all I was actually doing was arriving at who I was supposed to be. I didn't have to reinvent anything. I was on this path, because guess what? All of my production expertise is how this thing got done. Me being able to be a general contractor and being eye for detail, and you go here and you do this and you sit down and you shut up, all that kind of thing, you know, all of that got this done because I'm just one woman, but those skills came in. Now that the project's done, all I'm doing is education all day long. And because of my master's and my experience, I can talk to third graders or fourth graders, and I had a beautiful group of Asian elders, Cantonese speaking, that all had headsets on, and one translator that was talking into a microphone, translating to them as I was talking, right? And that was just a tour. And they were political, Asian women, older Asian women, gray-haired, I'm saying 70s maybe. And they were into it. They were completely paying attention and learned all kinds of things about whatnot. And that has been a really powerful me acknowledging that has been, I think, the coolest thing about this whole project. You know, because there's people that are 20 years old and I'm going to law school and I'm going to da-da-da-da, and then they become a lawyer. That's great. But you don't have to stay a lawyer. You know, you can be a doctor. You don't have to stay a doctor. You can be a doctor for 15 years. Guess what? I mean, life is long. I mean, all praises, but it's long. And I wish that more people would talk about that. I'm saying that to you, for young Black women. Whatever you're doing now as careers doesn't necessarily need but what you're doing in 20 years. Likely what you're doing now will inform that. But people who get stuck in a job, I feel bad that they think they can't transition. The other thing that I've learned is that this whole thing was written. That's very, very clear. This whole thing was written probably well before I was born. When I start connecting dots of how I came to the Bay Area, how I ended up in Oakland, how I discovered West Oakland and the history of West Oakland and the Black Panther Party, how I came to buy this house with no money, no credit, and 3 jobs, and all of these things in my community coming together. And the like, I was like a dog with a bone when I found this house. I'm like, no, it's my house. It's my house. I wrote a letter to the owner. You don't know me. I don't have very much money, but you're going to sell this house to me because it's my house. And he did. And, 20 plus years later, when you see the mural on this corner house and you see the museum downstairs, and I understand the way the quiet of COVID and the stillness of COVID allowed me to listen what my ancestors may have been trying to direct me. I don't know. Because you're always moving so fast and going. You might ask them something, and by the time they're answering, you're off to doing something else and you don't hear them. And so the quiet of COVID finally allowed me to hear what they wanted me to do. And I was able to execute it only because of them, because all of this happened during COVID. It doesn't make any sense when you think about it. Street name change, which that's the city. That happened in less than 6 months. During COVID, on city property, the street name was changed to E.P. Newton Way. It's all ancestor driven. So this whole thing was written. Everything was conceived, executed, and born in 12 months, almost to the date, from June 2020 to June 2021. And there's a, with both of those things that I learned, there's an ease that comes with them. It reduces your stress, that I don't have to figure out everything. I don't have to reinvent myself. I can trust the ancestors. I know this is supposed to be happening. I know that I'm cared for. I know there's abundance. I know all these, whatever you say to yourself, right? So yeah, an ease I have learned to trust. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Oh my gosh. I feel like we have so much. Thank you so much for just your richness and your research and your mind and sharing all of that information with us. It's so valuable, and I can't wait to like cut this together and have people look at it and watch it. Yeah, I agree.
Yes,
I think
thank you
this
so
has been
much.
Yeah.
truly.
Delilah, Michaela, you have any questions?
Yeah, I do have one. I'm interested to know, and this is like, I guess, related, but also kind of a little unrelated to the specific topic. But when you were talking about how we kind of re-traumatize ourselves through, like the murals that we paint, and even it made me think a lot about like the music that we listen to, especially like in rap culture, like Lacey and I were from DC, and like, back home, just thinking about like how the music is constantly us talking, like especially men talking about how hurt they are inside and the things that they're doing to cope with their depression and their pain. And I think it even made me think how here in LA, like all the murals that you see are like of Nipsey Hussle and like all of these and Kobe. Like, it makes me question, like ask myself, how do we kind of like remember how do we cope through the pain and honor that part of tragedy that happens while also finding joy through it? Because I think you made some really great points in terms of like, we should be remembering the joy, and we should like be remembering the beautiful things that we have done and that we are doing. But I think it's kind of like, where's the I think people still feel like they need to honor the pain, but I think we also need to move out of that at the same time. So I just kind of wanted to know what you thought about that.
Yeah, I think there's a very, very big difference between a mural of Kobe Bryant or Nipsey Hussle compared to a mural of Mike Brown or Trayvon Martin. Kobe Bryant is joyful. Kobe Bryant is an expression of Black joy. His death, while tragic, does not negate all of the things that he contributed with. I don't know if you're an NBA fan, but he changed the game of basketball like Michael Jordan did, like Steph Curry does, and not like LeBron James. But we can edit that out. But anyway, so what I was saying earlier, why aren't we painting pictures, right? So Nipsey Hussle and Nipsey Hussle is absolutely, there should be murals of him. Nipsey Hussle was changing the face of LA, which is why he was killed. I believe that, and I'll believe that until I get to the other side and confirm it. He was reducing gang violence. He was encouraging Black people to buy property. He was giving Black people jobs when nobody else would. He was breaking down shit to people. He was focused on uplifting Black people, like a Black Panther Party kind of thing, right? So those are the people that have transitioned that I do support there being murals of, like Shirley Chisholm and James Baldwin and Maya Angelou and Bayard Rustin, right? These are people, James Baldwin dedicated his life to activism and speaking up for the liberation of Black people. That's what the plaza should be named after. Here in Oakland, we have a plaza named after Oscar Grant. Oscar Grant is nobody's hero.
No.
Oscar Grant did not contribute anything to society. He was an 18-year-old boy that did not survive white supremacy. That is not a hero. That is not an icon. That is not something we should look up to. And my thing is, as Black people who are so familiar with lynching victims, I don't think we actually need to be reminded of who Mike Brown is or Oscar Grant. I don't know about you, but I'm never going to forget those people. I'm never going to forget their names. I don't have to make a concerted effort to memorize their names or their faces. They're burned into my brain as somebody. Ahmaud Arbery, I know exactly what he looks like. He was a young man who was attacked by a mob of white men and shot in the middle of the daylight, in the middle of the street, right? But he's not a hero. He's not a martyr. He didn't die fighting for the rights of people. He was a brother that was jogging. You know what I mean? You see the differences? But why is it that we make t-shirts of these lynching victims, but we're not making t-shirts of the people that are fighting for our liberation? And what I do when I have groups of folks out here, younger people, like, teens or in their 20s, I'll say, in your lifetime, can you name 5 people who've been killed by the police? And yes, I can. I don't ask them to name them because I don't want to know. And then I'll say, can you name 5 Black authors? Can you name 5 Black inventors? Can you name 5 Black senators? 5 Black poets, 5 Black artists, 5 Black ballerinas, anything else? Anything else that might be a picture in your brain that you aspire to be, right? Aspire to be an author or an activist or a revolutionary or a painter or a senator or a governor. Don't paint the pictures of people you don't aspire to be. Don't memorize those faces. Don't memorize those names. And to me, I'm not in any way, and I believe this to my bone, I'm not dishonoring these people by saying, I'm not going to memorize your name, because I'm saying, I'm never going to forget your name. I'm never going to forget your name because they won't let me forget your name. But what's really, really powerful in that is I have to do exercises where I lay in bed, okay, Jill, quick, name 10 Black authors. Now name 10 Black female authors. Name 10 Black, and it's a struggle. And I have degrees and I'm an intelligent person, but it's about what I'm focused on. It's about the images that I'm being shown. It's about the conversations that everybody's having. We're not having conversations about Black authors. We're having conversations about Black people who've been killed by the police. So guess
Yeah.
what? Those names are going to come first. I don't want that for my brain. I don't want that for my heart. I don't want that for my people.
Yeah.
Not healthy. It's not healthy. And we're doing their work. By us doing that, by naming plazas after George Floyd, we've got white supremacy on autopilot.
Yeah.
We're making people who didn't survive white supremacy our heroes versus the people who fought white supremacy into the day they died. Have we read their books? Do we know what their thoughts are? You know what I mean? That's my thing. So Nipsey Hussle, Kobe Bryant, Maya Angelou, James Baldwin, all day. Shirley Chisholm, murals, all day. Because just think about it this way. You're walking down the street with your daughter or your son, and they say, "Mommy, who's that?" Who do you want them to be pointing to? How do you want to answer that question if the picture looks like them? Do you want to answer that question by saying, "Oh, he was killed by police"? Or do you want to say, "Oh, he was an amazing author that grew up right down the street from us. We should go get a book by him"? You know, point at her, "Oh, she was killed by the police in Texas," or, "Oh, she was the first Black woman that ran for president. You can run for president." What do we want to see? What are we focused on? And the idea when you're saying, what do you want people to feel when they're looking at the mural? That's what I said. I want our shoulders to go back. I want our backs to be straight. I don't be exhausted all the time. I don't want us to be holding the burdens of the world all the time.
I totally feel that. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much. I hate to like cut it short because I feel like we could keep going and going. I really am enjoying this conversation. But I know I have a meeting in 10 minutes.
Okay.
I'm gonna go, but I just wanted to say thank you so much. Honestly, wholeheartedly. Thank you so much.
Thank you
For
so
sure. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And yeah, just check back in with me if you have more questions or anything else.